All right, so we're kind of like back in here right now, so let's go ahead and move on. So I'm going to do a different color just because I'm going to check it out. We're going to use green because it's my favorite. So when we think about like what this data is, right, what this information is, what usually happens is that we get into, so when we think about data, this is information about something. And like with this information, right, we're usually interested in kind of a different thing, right? So we're usually interested in the center of the data, which is usually the mean or average, and sometimes called the expected value. But this could also be the median, which is the halfway point of data. And we're also interested in the spread. And when we think about what spread is, right? So like if these data are narrow, so this is close to the mean, or if they're wide. So if they are highly spread out, so each of these things, right, are very interesting, and we'll kind of learn throughout the rest of this course, like how we go through this and why it's important to understand and things like that. So we have that. We're also interested in some point in like how we count this kind of stuff, right? So sometimes we have discrete data, and this is going to be linked to a variable that we keep track of. So discrete data are going to be like a count. And this is going to be things like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And sometimes data are recorded as continuous. And we think about this is going to be more like all possible values. And so let's say, for example, this could be like 1.23456. It could also be 2.76. It could also be like 5.12579. Point being, right, is that each of these like decimals, right, show it's a unique value. And so it becomes more continuous because it's more than just like these counts that were over here. So just keep that in mind whenever we're working with these data, is that they can be counted like in a couple different ways, right? And we're usually interested in most frequent occurrences. And that's mainly because they tell more of a regular pattern about the world. Although there are also times when we think about, where we might be interested in rare events. So that could be people who end up going to prison, right? Also interesting, but mainly not the focus of this course. But it is something to know, is that when we think about studying crime and other issues, right, sometimes we're interested in rare events like that could be like people shot by police. It could also be in certain circumstances. This could be amount of free throws made by Shaq. or walks issued by Greg Maddox. Point being is that when we think about like the data and what we can use here, right? There's a lot of different things that we could use and that we could learn, but they're all like very important, right? So know that we can kind of do this, right? So one form of data that we usually kind of collect, right, is our categories. And so this is going to be like if we collected information, right? So let's say that we were interested in hair color. Or that's not something really interesting, right? Let's do something more interesting. Let's say like gang membership. And this is for a prison application. And so let's say, for example, we had Crips. We won't get into specific sex of it. We had Bloods, LA Kings, or Latin Kings. That's what I meant. Latin Kings. Or I don't even know. Like, man, I should really like up my gangs, right, or something like that. I remember like people used to do the blood symbol in high school, but like I don't know. I don't even know how to do. I think you could maybe do that again. I don't know. This video is not capturing that, so we're not going to do that. I don't know, but we could do. We'll start for there, right? And we could do about like what's the name of like a white power group? I don't know. We'll just say Nazis. And so these are people like in prison, right? And so each of these are a different category, right? So we wouldn't want to put like there are 2.7 people in Crips, right? Because that doesn't make any sense, right? But we would get into like a count of what's happening, right? So there could be, let's say there are 67 Crips, right? And then we could say there are 38 Bloods and maybe 70 Latin Kings and then 14 Nazis or something like that, right? So what we did up here, this is, right, forms a summary. So what we did was summarize by showing how many people were in each category, right? And so if we maybe like want to find out like a way to summarize this or like how many or whatever, and pull out my calculator right now, we could do this through a proportion, right? So proportion is like a fraction. It's the same thing that you've already done. So in this case, right, if we added up 67 plus 38 plus 70 plus 14, we get 189, right? So if we created like a proportion, if we added 67 plus 38 plus 70 plus 14, we get 189 people. So what do we do with that, right? So then we could maybe create like a percentage chart, right? So if we had Crips, and we had Bloods, and we had LK, and then we had Nazis, right? We would know that, say, 67 out of 189, we would know that about 35% of all people in this prison are Crips. If it was for Bloods, right, if it was 38 by 189, we would know that this is 20%-ish. If we did Latin Kings, and so out of 189, this would be 37%. And Nazis, 189 would be like 7%. So all I did out of this, right, is that to solve these proportions, right, so I would take 67, divide by 189, and this would equal like 0.3544974. And what I would end up doing, right, is first thing, you could either do this either way, it doesn't really matter. So one would be like round, so then this would be 0.35. We'll always try to go to 2 decimal places or as many significant digits are necessary, and multiply that by 100, and then you end up with 35%. Point being, and what we just did here, right, is that we identified different categories, right? So we had Crips, Bloods, Latin Kings, Nazis. We know that there are 67, 38, 70, 104. We add them all up, 189, right? And so we created this fraction to figure out the proportion. We come out with it. So we know that there's about a third that are in, Crips. We know there's about a fifth of them are in Bloods. Latin Kings are nearly 40%, and Nazis are like 7%, right? And so this gives us what we just did, right, is that this summary gives insight as to who is in prison or what gangs are in prison. And so if we think about this, right, we understand like the relative frequency or what's going on here, right? So pretty easy to figure out, not a huge deal, but we could, what uses could we have for this information, right? We could maybe figure out who is most influential. We could also think about who to target for information. We could also maybe figure out who is quick to eliminate. Point being, right, is that all this information that we just had is like super useful, super great for understanding what's going on, and it's super nice, right? And so let's imagine though that we came into being, right? So that's something that we'll kind of like hold on to right there, and actually we'll kind of end the video right there. I'll leave most of the graphing stuff for you guys to learn. And on your own, I think you guys can handle that, but I just kind of want to summarize like why some of this information is useful.